Strap yourselves in, ladies and gentlemen, because not only do we have two sets to go over here, but we are beginning what I like to refer to as the modern age of excess. Because, oh my goodness, there are so many cards in this set. Hey guys, this is GamerCow. Welcome to another Pokemon Trading Card Game History video. This time we're going over one of the most popular retro formats of the modern era, Lost Thunder. Sun and Moon to Lost Thunder is an incredibly diverse format, and there's just so many cool cards in this set alone to speak about. I think Sai put it best that this is the single most diverse opening set that we have ever had. And yeah, there's obviously a ton of good stuff from the previous stuff that can work as well, but there are loads and loads of cards in here which are just absolutely insane as well. We do have Dragon Majesty as well. This is a much smaller side set that continued some of the Gen 3 nostalgia stuff that we have here. There's a little bit of it continues in here as well. I don't necessarily remember all of the stuff that was Gen 3 nostalgia in here, but I do know the Macago is one of the ones that was basically the EX before, so that's kind of cool. And yeah, the Dragon Majesty set, obviously a lot of dragon type stuff in here, a lot of support for dragons as well. We haven't really seen this sort of thing too often. Dragon types do tend to be pretty difficult to play in the TCG, so nice to see some of that. And then yeah, some old school stuff for fire and water in here as well. Because there are so many cards, and we haven't even looked at the promo stuff yet, there's an extended amount of these because of the fact that Celestial Storm Worlds format was a 2-week thing, so there wasn't really any chance for these promos to come out. Because of all of this, I actually have set aside all the cards that I want to speak about over here. And you can see there are still well over 100 of them here, so we've got quite a bit to go through. But I've split them up into the trainer card stuff at the top. There are like 2 trainers, I think, which were just so bad that we wouldn't even talk about them. Because there's just no point. They were absolutely worthless. But then we have what is expected to be the meta Pokemon over here. There's a lot of these which end up seeing quite a bit of play, and there's a ton of good decks and stuff you can build around that. And then there's a good off-meta portion down here as well. That's not to say these cards are bad. There are a few of these which are actually played in, you know, like lower placing but still noteworthy championship point winning decks. Stuff like the Persian over here actually did win some CP. So there's a bunch of these which are still really good, but most of these are like the ones I would talk about as being interest pool sort of things. There's a few of them that are like good, but you know, maybe not so strong compared to the other stuff. But I like talking about everything we possibly can out of these, because sometimes some weird things end up seeing a ton of play, and it ends up being pretty interesting as a result. Just briefly going into the promo stuff here, one thing you might not see if you do play Sun and Moon to Lost Thunder with other people is this promo selection down here. I think it is relatively well established that stuff like the Evolutions and whatnot are actually fine, and the Solgaleo is definitely like generally okay, but the main offender here is the Magikarp and Wailord, because this is the first tag team that ever got released. The next set that comes out is Team Up, which is where the tag team format officially begins, and this is one thing that people love this format for, is the lack of tag teams. Tag teams is a mechanic. I guess we do have to briefly go over it because we have this guy in here. We're going to be allowing this in the Garnadel Quagsire decks, and that's about it really. But this guy is a gigantic 300 HP dude. This is the largest that we ever get for tag teams. Tag team Pokemon are basics, which is absolutely absurd, but they are worth 3 prize cards if you KO them. So yeah, it's kind of almost impossible to one-shot these things most of the time, but you take half of your prizes in one go for it. In particular, the Magikarp and Wailord over here is quite often a stall card, but specifically in the Garnadel Quagsire deck, because of its water typing, you do actually see it attack sometimes, so we can go over those. Super Splash for 180 damage is 5 water energy. This is the Wailord part coming through for sure. This is just what it does, right? Gigantic energy cost. The damage is actually like okay. If you can get a choice band on that thing, 210 KO Zoroark in one hit, so that's kind of neat. And then Towering Splash only does 10 damage as the GX attack, but here is the other tag team gimmick. If you have bonus energy on them, they can do a secondary effect as well. In this case, you need 7 extra water energy, so it goes up to 8 in total that you need. But if you manage that, it's 10 to the active and 100 to each of the opponent's bench Pokemon, without any stipulation attached to it. So it's not the same as the Black Ray. It wasn't Black Ray. The Crowsburst attack. I forget exactly what it was called, but it's 100 to each of the opponent's EX and GX Pokemon. No stipulation on this one, even the single prizes get wrecked. So if you use this against the Malamar deck, they are crying. Something fierce. The rest of these we can go over as we do. There are a couple of these I've got in the interest pool stuff anyway. So let's just go over the cards as I normally would. Trainer cards first because they are kind of important to note. The only duplicate that I have in here is the Sightseer because I just want to show both the artworks off here. The actual card is really quite good since we did just lose Professor Sycamore. You can discard any number of cards from your hand that you want, and then you draw until you have 5 cards in hand. You do have to be able to draw a card in order to play this, so you can't just use it when you've got like 8 cards in hand and discard 2. You do have to draw at least 1 card with this. The reason I'm showing both artworks is because this was the original one that came out, and then later on there was a promo version which is literally just the camera's perspective, and this is just super cute. Really nice one to have around, so yeah, we have both forms of that. It's very nice. On to the rest of it as we go. Adventure Bag will sometimes see a little bit of play. Search your deck for up to 2 tool cards, put them into the hand. Tool cards are still items at the moment, so you can use item search to get them as well. So decks that play like Volkner could still get items regardless for the tool cards. But if you play one of these, you can get 2 different ones. So if you're playing a lot of different tool cards, this is really good. Custom Catcher is something we will see a lot more later, but can still see some play at the moment in basic heavy decks. You can play 2 of these at the same time, so we're going back to the modular thing that started in Generation 4. If you only play 1, you draw until you have 3 cards in hand, so it's like Instruct off of Oranguru. Not amazing, but sometimes will bail you out of bad hands, so there is that. But if you play 2 at the same time, it is Boss's Orders. Switch your opponent's bench to the active, like Gust them up. This will be the only form of Gust that is in the beginning of the next format in the 2020 stuff, because we do actually lose Guzma without a replacement, so it will see play much more next rotation. But it's still worth noting at the moment, because if you can search it out specifically, you can go ahead and save your supporter for a draw or something and still get a Gust effect. So it can see play, particularly Boswell decks will play this. Electro Power is insane, but we'll see a lot more play in the next set because we get Pico Arm. This lets you do 30 more damage with your Lightning Pokemon's attacks to the opponent's active. No spread damage buffing with this, but you really don't generally see that, so that is fine. This is ridiculous. Like, we see this in Mew decks nowadays with the Fusion Strike, like power tablets as they're called. Absolutely absurd just how much extra damage you can get out of this. And yeah, lightning types do have Volkner. Search your deck for lightning energy and an item, you can use it to get this. So yeah, stupid powerful. We just don't really have an amazing lightning deck at the moment. The Jolteon down the bottom there is actually good, but is a lot better next set, so I don't know if we'll see play at the moment. Fiery Flint is the beginning of the fire type support from Dragon Majesty over here. You discard 2 cards from your hand and search your deck for up to 4 fire energy cards, put them into the hand. We just lost Professor's Letter, so this is actually the only item-based energy search that we have in the format right now, outside of Netball that we'll get into later, a couple of cards time. It's fine. It's really good for the decks that actually want it, but right now, not a lot of decks want all of the fire energy in hand. We want them in the deck to accelerate with Kiawe. Once we get Welder, however, then it suddenly becomes an entirely different story, and this card becomes absolutely busted. So, watch this space. Lost Blender is like a really bad version of Maintenance. Put 2 cards from your hand into the Lost Zone and then draw 1 card. There is exactly one deck that uses this, and it is the Lost March deck that we will get into in the Pokemon section. Other than that, pretty terrible to be honest. Like, I even very briefly considered this in the Gramble deck we'll talk about, but the fact if you draw a card afterwards as well is often kind of bad, because it means then you still need to be able to play that card. So yeah, kind of annoying. Mixed Herbs sees play, I think, in exactly Celosaur in the next set. Maybe sometimes in Luke Metal, I don't remember. It's another 2 of. If you just play one of this card at a time, you remove 1 special condition from your active Pokemon. Whoop-de-doo, right? That's full heal is never been a good card, so we don't care. But if you play 2 of these at the same time, it heals 90 damage and removes all special conditions. Doesn't usually make much more of a difference at that point, because most of the time you're not getting afflicted by multiple, but I don't know, if you've been like paralyzed and poisoned or something at the same time, then you can play 2 of these and heal both of those as well. It's mostly for the 90 damage that you'll see this. 90 damage in a single go is pretty good healing. Yes, we've got Max Potion at the moment, but the decks that would play this do not want to discard their energy. So once you get a big tank deck that also needs its energy, this starts seeing a fair bit more experimentation. Netball is the newest Pokeball that we have here. Search your deck for a basic grass Pokemon or a grass energy card, put it into the hand. Don't know why it doesn't do anything with water, because Netball is for water and bug Pokemon, but you know, whatever, it's a grass only thing here. If you're playing a grass deck, you play 4 of this obviously. There are a couple of good grass decks that we could still play, at least at the moment, before Welder comes in and ruins everything. But this is still very powerful, because yeah, getting an energy card potentially is also really good too, so excellent versatility on this. Switch Raft is kind of like Switch Cart in the modern game, except it only works on water Pokemon. Switch your active waters with one of your bench Pokemon and heal 30 from the Pokemon you move to the bench. Cool, but what deck is playing only water at the moment? Gen 7 water is like probably the weakest water's ever been, so not a lot of decks are going to be playing just water Pokemon that this can work on, so not super good. Wait and See Hammer, I absolutely despise this kind of design. It's basically like Battle VIP Pass. You can only use this if you go second and only on your first turn. Discard an energy from one of the opponent's Pokemon. So it's automatic Crushing Hammer, but you can only use it once, basically, because the opponent's only going to have 1 energy on them. And you can only use it if you go second. Yeah, really bad to be honest. Just not really any reason to use this like ever, but I think I might have seen this like once or twice, and it despises. You know, I despise it. It's just terrible. Supporter cards. If a Foundation employee is not very good, unfortunately, because the Alolan Pokemon, it's not that they're like terrible, but there's no deck build around them. Put 3 of them from the discard into the hand. You know what else we can kind of do to recover Pokemon from this region? Just play Rescue Stretcher, right? I know they go into the deck if you don't take just 1, but do you normally need 3 Pokemon from discard to hand at the same time? Didn't think so. So yeah, really not good. Also doesn't have a full art, so that should say all we need here. Blaine's Last Stand is from Dragon Majesty. If it is the last card in your hand, you draw 2 cards for each fire Pokemon you have in play. I don't think this ever saw any serious play, but it's a cute idea at the very least. The fact that it has to be the last card in hand, though, kind of messes stuff up a fair bit. It's very similar to like Maxie's Hidden Ball Trick and stuff like that, except it just doesn't have anywhere near as much utility as that. Draw 2 is for each is great, because you'll usually get 6 to 8 cards off of that. But again, you know what actually also works in that situation is Lily, because you just draw 6 without drawback at that point. That seems perfectly fine to me, so I don't know, not super good. Faber is an extremely irritating card that will see some play. It's not quite as ubiquitous as Zerosic was, but it basically is just a stronger version of that. You choose a tool or special energy card from one of the opponent's Pokemon, or a stadium card in play, and put it into the Lost Zone. The catch with this, I guess, is you can't discard your own tools this time round, but most of the time that like really wasn't the reason you would play a supporter card in the first place, and we still have Field Blower that can do that. but this is a special energy removal or a stadium removal. Both of those can matter, and lost zoning the thing means there's no way of recovering it, so no hollow hunts or anything like that can get it back. So yeah, very irritating card. Lance is a new Prism Star supporter that we have here. If one of your Pokemon was KO'd during the last turn, search your deck for up to 2 dragons, put them onto the bench. It's not basic dragon, it is any dragon, so the idea with this is you get your stage 2s out. Probably Dragonite would be the main one, because it is Lance after all, and then Dragonite has a GX attack that can get more dragons in play as well. So that I think is the idea, but man, this stipulation is rough, and you've got to be able to have it on that turn. And if you play Lele to get this, that means you're clogging your bench up a bit more before getting this out. It's just so awkward. Not really amazing, to be honest. Lusamine also gets a Prism Star supporter here. This is a different name compared to the regular Lusamine, so you are allowed to play this in addition. If your opponent has exactly 3 prize cards remaining, you get to play this and prevent all damage done to your Ultra Beast by attacks during your opponent's next turn. So basically gives you a blanket wide agility if you are playing an Ultra Beast exclusive deck. There will be times where this can come up, especially if you're playing a single prize Ultra Beast deck, which there are enough of at this point that you can do that sort of thing. And it can come up. It's okay, but getting it on the right turn is a bit awkward. And if the opponent goes away from 3 prizes, yeah, then you can't do the thing. What this is kind of nice for though is extending your Beast Ring turns. Because if your opponent is on 3 prizes left and your Beast Rings are still active, so this means you can get another turn of being able to use Beast Rings, and that can actually matter as well. So, sometimes might come up. Mina is probably my favourite supporter from this set. Search your deck for a Fairy Energy, attach it to one of your Pokemon. Not the most common of cards to see played, but I absolutely adored this in the God of War Sylveon stuff later on, so it will see play by me eventually. Because I have deck lists from this time period that I played on PTCGO. Had a few of them that had this, so it will be played, but I don't remember actually seeing Tony's success, sadly. Moving on, we have Morty. If one of your Psychic Pokemon was KO'd during your opponent's last turn, so kind of like Dianva, but for Psychic type stuff, the opponent reveals the hand and you shuffle 2 cards that you find there back into the deck. Pretty disruptive. I think this might see play alongside a couple of it. There's a couple other disruptive supporters that you could see play with this. You could maybe play this in like single prize Malamar based stuff, but it's probably just a little bit awkward at that point, because if you're playing non-psychic Pokemon and one of those gets KO'd, you can't even play it in the first place. You can use Tapu Lele to search it, and Tapu Lele is also psychic, so you know, if your Lele gets gusted up or something, you could probably disrupt. But, I don't know. We don't have a ton of disruption in this format, so hand sizes do get kind of large. Don't know if this is really worth it that way, though. And ideally, you would want to use this after you play Marshadow, but that requires you to hard draw it after using Marshadow as well. Good luck with that. Professor Elm's Lecture is the replacement to Bridget. It searches for 3 Pokemon with 60 HP or less and puts them into the hand. There's a couple of differences here. One, of course, it doesn't go straight to the bench. 2 is it doesn't get GXs because no GX has got less than 150 HP, so you can't do the same thing as you would with Bridget before and get all of your basic GXs out. But the third thing it does is it doesn't say basic Pokemon. So there's one deck, the Lost March deck, that has a Pokemon with 60 HP, the Skiploom down here, that is an evolution, and you can use it to search that too. If you're wanting to play the Alolan Dugtrio meme for whatever reason, without Professor's Letter, I think you're crazy, but if you do, Alolan Dugtrio is also 60 HP, so you can search it out. The other nice thing is that they go to the hand instead of directly onto the bench, which means that you can use them to get like an excess card for trades and stuff like that as well. So, kinda neat. We've already gone over Sightseer, so Whitney is the next one here. This is in an exactly one deck that is a Cheese Bowl deck later on. You draw 1 card, but then you draw 2 extra cards for each other Whitney in the discard pile. So your first one only gives you 1, but the second one gives 3, and the final one would give 7 if you get that far in. A raw draw 5 or 7 is absolutely insane. It's just you've kind of got to get all of them into your hand. That's not easy to do. Oh, you've got to get them all in the discard first, right? That's even harder to do. So, yeah, good luck. But there is exactly one deck that just straight draws cards and needs a ton of cards in hand. So, yeah, we'll see. Zinnia is our last supporter, again from Dragon Majesty. If one of your Pokemon was KO'd last turn, you attach up to 2 basic energy cards from your hand to one of your Dragon Pokemon. Unfortunately not very good, because we don't have a way of getting the energy cards into hand without using a supporter card. And if you have to do that, then you can't play the Zinnia. Thankfully, it doesn't require a Dragon Pokemon to be KO'd, so if you use like a Vulpix or something, then you can still get your stuff out, which is fine. Like if Vulpix goes down, you can still get energy attached. It's just a stipulation of being in hand is really difficult to work with here. Maybe with Turtonator you could do it with like the fire energy stuff, but then the problem will come that Welder just outclasses it later. So I don't know. Stadium cards, they're all Prism Star Stadiums this time, and Prism Star Stadiums have an extra stipulation on them which prevents them from being affected by item and supporter cards played from the hand. So this means that Field Blower cannot remove the Prism Star Stadium. This is to balance the fact that you can only play one of this in the deck, and Stadium bounces in general still work, and attacks will still discard them, so there's still a couple of drawbacks. Heat Factory, however, is just like a straight upgrade on Scorched Earth that we lost in rotation. You discard 1 fire energy card from your hand once per turn and draw 3 cards, which is pretty solid. So, great one for the fire types. Unfortunately, Life Forest continues the fact that grass types generally get shafted by stuff here. It's supposed to be the healing archetype, I suppose. Once during each player's turn, they can heal 60 and remove all special conditions from one of their grass Pokemon. Mostly whoop-de-doo, but Celosaur actually does enjoy playing this card because they do get to heal the extra damage off it too. It's got a ton of HP, so it does actually matter in that deck. And then Thunder Mountain is going to come up later on because Lightning Pokemon pay 1 Lightning less to attack, which is ridiculous. This makes Raikou attack for nothing and accelerate from the discard. Really, really good. It also makes the Jolteon actually attack for 1 energy with its second attack. So, yeah, really, really strong stuff, and we will see a ton of this as soon as the next set when Pikarom comes out. For tool cards, we actually have quite a few here. Choice Helmet is the opposite of Choice Band. You take 30 less damage from the opponent's GX and EX Pokemon. That's kind of cool. Some tank decks could play this because Choice Band really doesn't do anything for that type of deck. So, if it's not a metal deck at the very least, because they've got Frying Pan, you could see this get played. Counter Gain is another one of the comeback cards from this era. If you have more prizes remaining than the opponent, the attacks that you use on this Pokemon take 1 colorless less. So that's kind of cool. Means that your triple colorless Pokemon will take 2 to attack instead of 3, so they can use a DCE. And yeah, it's just pretty neat in general. If you've got like a 2 color plus 1 colorless cost on you, counter energy plus counter gain just pays that immediately, which is pretty solid. And then we have Dragon Talon, which is from Dragon Majesty, of course. If the Dragon Pokemon this is attached to is active and damaged by an attack, you put 3 damage counters on the attacking Pokemon. So it's like a Strikes Back sort of ability, but on the tool. That's fine. I mean, I've seen Poison Barb in decks at this point, so if you're playing a Dragon deck, this could technically be a decent deterrent. I don't think it's really strong enough though. Generally, you would just play Choice Band instead of this. But if your Dragon type is supposed to take at least 1 or 2 hits, you know, Dragonite maybe, you could probably make this work. And then we have the Fairy Charms, which are another kind of like Silvally Memories, which eventually we'll get more of those, don't worry. We get a bunch of charms for a bunch of different types here, where effectively, if it's on a Fairy Pokemon, and it is damaged by the opponent's GX or EX of the corresponding type, so like Dragon, Fighting, there's Grass up here for some reason, I don't know why they released Grass first, but whatever, and Psychic, you just don't take damage from those Pokemon. This can hard counter certain decks, but most of the time it's not going to be that big of a deal right now, because it doesn't prevent non-EX and non-GX from doing this stuff. So, you know, single prizes will still get through this just fine, and there's a lot of single prizes in this format, so Not the greatest here. However, when the Ultra Beast one comes out, that one sees a lot of play, because that's a very good specific out to Blacephalon from this set, so yeah. Finally, we have Spell Tag. I actually didn't realize this released in Lost Thunder, to be honest with you. This card is absurd. If your Psychic Pokemon is KO'd by damage on the opponent's attack and it has this attached to it, you put 4 damage counters on the opponent's Pokemon in any way that you like. Yeah, it's not only is it a good amount of damage to put down, but you get to spread it however you want. That is insane. It means you can't just like preserve certain bits on the bench as well. Truly, truly heinous. And the funny thing about this is it doesn't have to be active. If the opponent snipes the thing with Spell Tag, they still take the 4 damage counters. That's kind of unusual for this sort of effect, to be honest. So you could put this on a Malamar to stop the opponent from sniping them down if you really wanted to. Fun stuff. One special energy from this lot is Memory Energy. This effectively replaces Shining Celebi. If you attach this to the Pokemon, then you can use attacks from its previous evolution stuff. So probably the best use for this at the moment would be on Luxray, to be able to use Luxio's Disconnect. And it's for 1 colorless too, so it pays for the cost as well. So it's fine, just not really a lot to go with at the moment on it. Alright, meta Pokemon. There's like 50 of them that I have in here, because there's a lot of stuff for the future as well. Alolan Ninetales is like my favorite card from this set. Overall, this card is absolutely insane. It's a fairy type Pokemon this time round, 200 HP, so a little bit frailer than the water type one, but all 3 of its traits are like super good, and it is a right shame this gets power crept out in this block, to be honest. When you evolve your Vulpix into this, you get to search your deck for up to 2 item cards and put them into the hand. So use it in Stage 2 decks, get your Red Candy. Timer Ball is a thing that I enjoy getting with this as well in the testing stuff, and you just get your evolution to evolve into, and it's absolutely insane. Snowy Wind is not the strongest attack out there, but for a fairy and a colorless it does 70 and 30 to one of the opponent's bench. Because of Professor Elm's Lecture, a lot of decks are opting to use 60 HP basics instead of 70, so that they can still get their search free beginning. And this kind of punishes that, so pretty strong. You know, 70 damage on the active is still passable. And you might still want to charge this thing up anyway because of Sublimation GX. If the opponent's active is an Ultra Beast, it is automatically KO'd for a fairy and a colorless energy. So even counter game can still be pretty good here too. Like, if you're behind on prizes, you can Ninetales for counter game, put the fairy energy down on it, and automatically KO the Blacephalon, which is pretty solid. So yeah, a lot of very good traits on this card, and there are tons and tons and tons of decks in this particular format that will adore playing this. It's balanced though by the fact that it gives up 2 prizes. But there's also Beacon Vulpix, which is very strong with it. Slowking, a little bit more of a control-based tool here, but it actually sees play for its damage attack later on as well when Rashizard is a thing. The main trait for this at the moment is Memory Melt, which lets you look at the opponent's hand and put a card that you find there into the Lost Zone, so you can mess up their next turn plans. Psychic is strong enough with a Choice Band to one-shot, or even without a Choice Band if they're attacking with Reshiram and Zekrom. Reshiram and Charizard, because they're weak to water. 60 plus 20 for each energy on the opponent's active. That Reshiram, Reshizard tends to go to 4 energy, so 140 damage, times 2 for weakness, will get the one-shot. The fact that it's all colorless means you can pay for it with triple acceleration energy later on. That makes it actually pretty strong. So yeah, both parts of this kind of good. Onyx seems like a meme putting it here, especially because the artwork is amazing on this actually, because we've always heard about the Diglett tunnels and stuff here, like the Digletts living in Onyx tunnels is just hilarious. This 120 HP dude just does 120 damage for 4 colorless energy. That makes it playable because it means you can splash it into decks as an out to Pikarom if you have enough energy acceleration around. Because Pikarom actually gets one-shot by this. They have 240 HP exactly, and a weakness to fighting. So yeah, it's actually a common meta card in its own right. Lapras, I could have put this in the other section here, but it's used in control decks sometimes. Look at the top 2 cards of your deck, put them back in any order. It's similar to a Lunatone that we had in Gen 5 actually, but control is much stronger in this generation, and sometimes, yeah, this does actually come up at the moment. Not so much later on, but it's still pretty bulky, so it kind of fits. Ditto Prism is probably the best card in this set if you just look objectively. It's only got 40 HP and it doesn't have an attack and you can only play one of it, but it can evolve into any Stage 1 Pokemon, which is just ridiculous. It's not so good for Stage 2 decks because you can't rare candy this thing, but if you're playing a bunch of the Stage 1 line anyway in the deck, you might still get some use out of it. And this allows for some crazy tech lines as well. Like, the fact that it can evolve into anything means something like a Zorad deck could play one copy of Makago and no copies of Slugma and still be able to evolve into that Makago. A lot of decks will play Alola Muck because it's actually pretty strong in this meta, so that's another thing that you can go into. And yeah, this guy is just really freaking cool. Super fragile though. If you start with this, you are sweating bullets if you don't have another Pokemon, because 40 HP is like ridiculous. Speaking on low HP counts, EVGX. Very surprising one to see here. The 3 different artworks that you had of this guy were corresponding to the different evolutions that you, like the different sets that you could get for it. They're all the same card, however. It's only 160 HP, it's got 100 damage for 3 colors as its attack, that's basically never going to see play. The GX attack is actually pretty good because it's Decidueye's GX attack for 1 colorless energy, kind of absurd. Put 3 cards and discard power into the hand, really strong. But its Ascension DNA is typically what you would use this for, because it's additional copies of regular Eevee at this point. Once during your turn, before you attack, if you have a Pokemon in your hand that evolves some Eevee, put it onto this Pokemon and evolve it. Before evolving, you do fully heal the Pokemon, so you don't, if you're evolving into a non-GX, that means you don't like lose it to being automatically KO'd. However, you do have to follow the evolution rules, so you can't do this immediately, so there is a turn where this Eevee can get gusted up and KO'd. That's fine. Again, if you're playing like a bunch of evolution stuff, you might play this. It's usually superfluous, but that GX attack is pretty solid, so who knows. The 2 evolutions I want to highlight here are Jolteon and Flareon. Jolteon GX is insane. It's only 200 HP, but it's got no retreat, which is really good, and all of its attacks are solid. Remember that Electro Power can buff this as well. For 1 lightning energy, Electro Bullet is Jet Punch basically, 30 and 30 to one of the opponent's bench. This is really good because it means you can energy evolution into this and be able to do that on your first turn if you go second, so that's really good. Headbolt just does 110 for a lightning and a colorless, as does its GX attack for the same cost, but the GX attack is an automatic agility, which will come up in a ton of games. So prevent all effects of attacks including damage done to this Pokemon during your opponent's next turn. It's really strong, and Thunder Mountain makes this able to attack for 1 energy on its stronger moves, but it can also Electro Bullet for 0 at that point, which is insane. The other thing, if you're behind on prizes, you can counter gain this as well, and then it can do all of its attacks for nothing if Thunder Mountain's in play, which is really good. Counter gain also just works nicely for its other 2 attacks, so it's cheap to hit with, it does a reasonable amount of damage, and it can agility itself as well, which can make it very difficult for the opponent to close the game out. Yeah, not much to dislike about this guy. Flareon is a little bit harder to use, but is still pretty strong. 210 HP, and some pretty solid attacks with it here. Heat Stage lets you attach up to 3 fire energy from your hand to your Pokemon in any way that you like, for 1 fire energy, doing 30 damage. So really solid thing to energy evolve into here. Bright Flame does a whopping 190 for 2 fire and a colorless. You do have to discard 2 fire on it, but you're just accelerated with a previous attack, so that should be fine. And then once you've gotten all the fire energy discarded and whatnot, Power Burner for 1 fire does 20 for each fire that's in your discard pile. So really solid GX attack to finish things off as well. It's really strong. There's a lot of support that fire types will get as we go forward. This is like the best thing at the moment to do fiery flint shenanigans with. And yeah, then Power Burner later can do a ton. And there's a Victini we'll talk about later that can also do a lot with this card as well. So really good. Umbreon sees a decent bit of competitive play. It's another counter attacker. For 1 Dark Energy, it does 30 plus 90 if one of your Pokemon was KO'd by damage from an opponent's attack last turn. So, Energy Evolve the Eevee with a single Darkness Energy, you've got 120 damage out the gate. Really, really solid for single price stuff. And that 120 with a Dark Weakness is okay too. Like, it does one-shot Dawn Wings to Crozma, which is something that does see play in Malamar decks and whatnot. So, yeah, really good card. Meganium, one of the biggest jank enablers in this entire set. There are so many cool decks this plays with. So it's a stage 2, as Meganium would be. Its attack is irrelevant, we never have the energy to attack with it outside of exactly Super Boost energy. The 110 is not really worth it, so nobody cares. It's all about this ability. Once during the turn before you attack, choose one of your basic Pokemon in play. If you have a stage 2 in hand that evolves from it, straight up evolve that Pokemon. It can also be used during the first turn if you're playing Forest of Giant Plants and Expanded, or on the same turn that Pokemon was put into play. So you get one of these out, and it is effectively a quick fire rare candy, like Gen 3 rare candy, to play once per turn. And this lets you do some really, really wacky stuff. Obviously, if you use it on another one of itself, then you can do like 2 evolutions per turn. But there's a lot of things that have like coming into play abilities as well. Stuff like Greninja GX or Rhyperior are the main ones that we see. But there are others as well that we can just go straight into and get a really nice setup for. And yeah, there's just so many different decks that we could play with this. It's not even something I can go into right now, but Pepper's going to be showcasing some of them at some point, and I think he really wanted to do the Greninja stuff, so we'll see how that pans out. Spinarak is a weird one. This sees some play in certain Lost March variants, but I don't think any of the ones that topped in tournaments, but it's all about this ability here. You auto-paralyze the opponent's active and poison them, but you have to then put this Pokemon and all cards attached to it into the Lost Zone. Lost March is actually something we'll get into with a Natu here. It's an attack that's on Natu and Jumpluff exactly. I think there might be a Whimsicott later that has it, but it's not really it doesn't really see play. It's the same as Night March, but for Pokemon in the Lost Zone instead, except Prism Stars. So the reason why Ditto doesn't see play in the deck. So yeah, 20 damage for each Pokemon in the Lost Zone, so you get one Pokemon with this, you auto paralyze and poison the opponents, so they do have a bit of disruption on them, and you get a Pokemon in the Lost Zone. Problem is, you also get a Grass Energy in the Lost Zone, which is kind of awkward, but the deck is very slow to set up and is pretty frail, so there will be times where you can abuse this. Like, Natu was only 40 HP, right? It's the same sort of thing we're dealing with Night March before. It attacks for DCE. We don't have Dimension Valley, so unfortunately no single energy attack here. That would be cool. The problem, if we go down to the Jumpluff here, is that Jumpluff attacks for a Grass Energy. So you still need to play like Grass and Double Colors in here, and you might not have the right attach each time. It's one of several flaws compared to what Night March had to deal with. Mareep seems like a meme putting it up here, because like, why would this ever see play when the Armvorous is down in the gimmick section? It's because 2 specific reasons. It's got a 1 energy retreat, so it can use the skateboard or U-turn board, and its ability, if it's active, automatically puts the opponent to sleep. That doesn't sound amazing, but there is actually a specific Breloom later on that can do a decent amount of damage for 1 energy if the opponent is asleep, otherwise it does very little. So this can be used as an enabler for that, and there is a Stadium card that makes the opponent flip 2 coins for sleep as well. So sometimes it actually does just stick in addition to that. Very funny card to have around. Skiploom is worth noting in here. The Hoppips are nothing special, but Skiploom is how you get the Pokemon into the Lost Zone in the first place. When you use this ability, if you search your deck for a Jumpluff and find one, you put this Pokemon, all cards attached to it, into the Lost Zone, then put the Jumpluff in its place. If I don't believe you can, I'll have to double check, but I'm pretty sure you can't use this ability. Oh, I mean, you can use it, but you can't replace the Skiploom if there isn't Jumpluff in the deck. I'm pretty sure the Skiploom doesn't go to the Lost Zone in that situation. It's a bit weird with the way it's worded because it doesn't have that exclusion on it, but I'm pretty sure that's how it works. Once again, it's 60 HP, so Elm's Lecture can search this as well as Hoppips and Natus and stuff in the deck, so it's pretty solid. Jumpluff's 70 HP being the bulkiest thing in the deck, though, is pretty spooky, to be honest, so it's not a great deck, but it does have its moments. Quagsire, another throwback to Gen 3 stuff here. This has 120 HP, an okay attack, 60 plus 20 for each water that's attached to it, and its washout ability is mostly why this sees play. It lets you move water energy from your bench to your active, and that ends up working very well with the Naganadel, which we'll just briefly mention because it's used in a ton of decks, but it's especially good with Quagsire because it once per turn puts a basic energy from the discard pile onto itself, and then Quagsire moves it to the active, and your active can do everything it needs. Really, really good. Wobbuffet is a beautiful tech card, a very annoying tech card in the next set, once we actually get Tapu Koko Prism, because as long as this is on the bench, Prism Star Pokemon in play cannot attack and have no abilities. The Tapu Koko really relies on its ability to make the Pikarom deck attack super quickly, and this just says no. So, good Pokemon to have as a tech. Speaking on good tech stuff, and also kind of a control tool here, Girafarig, its attack is nothing special, we don't care about that, but its first attack is what we need. Mind Shock is not good, but Get Lost, very funny attack name here, puts 2 cards in the opponent's discard pile into the Lost Zone. Anti-control is the goal with this, but it can also be used in control decks to Lost Zone stuff that the opponent is recovering more often than not as well. If stuff is getting discarded and then recovered, say basic energy or whatever, you could probably use it for that too. But it's most noteworthy for disrupting the supporter loops and things that get used later on in the format. So yeah, very strong card. On to my favourite attacker from this set. I've basically gone through every category, I think now. Granbull is a 130 HP dude that does 160 damage for 1 energy. The catch is that you have to have 0 cards in your hand, otherwise it only does 30. The deck is super cool getting around this. It's one of the sort of big brain style decks, we would say, but it's one that I think is an excellent teaching tool if you are just learning how to play the competitive game properly, because this lets you really see just how to sequence your turn to get this to work every time. Super, super nice card. Shuckle is really good for the Alolan Exeggutor deck, and kind of any other deck that wants to accelerate from the discard specifically. When you bench this guy, you get to discard up to 3 basic energy from your deck. So the Exeggutor deck will discard different types of energy so that they can all be powering up the Exeggutor. Other stuff can just accelerate with it, which is pretty good. And the other neat thing about this is its attack. It does take a grass energy specifically, but it lets you double accelerate from the discard pile. Any basic energy type too. So you can use this very, very nicely with itself. It's kind of neat. Just accelerate more stuff. Viridian Forest I think ends up helping this quite a bit as well, because you can recover the energy, but that's next set. The GX, however, is a much more irritating thing, which is effectively just a wall. If the opponent has 2 or fewer energy attached to them, you do not take any damage from them. Yay! It's that Mr. Mime from Gen 4, but now just like even more annoying because it's on a GX here. Triple Poison does exactly what it says it does. For 1 color's energy, puts a triple poison status on the opponent's active. And then Wrap GX is probably the dumbest GX attack out there, but it definitely comes up. 1 color's energy, 40 damage, auto paralysis. That's all. Not a very strong one, but auto paralysis in a wall deck is definitely irritating. Magcargo GX sees a fair amount of play in the discard pile at the very end of this format with Mewtwo and Mew, but it actually can work with its non-GX counterpart and be a pretty strong deck in its own right. It's effectively Makago EX from all the way back in Dragon, I think is when it came out. Once during your turn before you attack, you can discard the top card of your deck. If it's a basic energy, attach it to one of your Pokemon. So the idea is the other Makago can stack an energy on top of the deck, you discard it with this, and you get it immediately. Lava Flow lets you discard any amount of basic energy from this Pokemon and do 50 plus 50 for each you discarded. Base cost is 2 fire and a colorless, so you do have to discard quite a bit to make this work, but its own ability can help there, and then you do stuff like Energy Recycler to get them back into the deck, and just keep on going through. Kinda solid. Its GX attack is generally what it sees use for, but I mean, Lava Flow is pretty good too. But Burning Magma GX is often something that the Mewtwo and Mew deck would fish for at the very end of the game if they haven't already burned their attack. 1 fire energy, discards top 5 in the opponent's deck. That's it, but it's still really solid. Sometimes that just wins the game on the spot, especially against control decks. So, good stuff. Suicune GX is a weird one. I think this sees most play in Nightquag, but yeah, I don't know, it's kind of weird. 180 HP, 2 retreat, sort of whatever. Phantom wins if it's on the bench, you just get to shuffle it and all cards attached to it back into the deck. So, I mean, I guess you could use this as a anti-like deck out thing if you really wanted to. I don't think the control decks will let you do that because they manipulate your top deck and stuff in this era, but it's still funny. Cure Stream for 2 water and a colorless does 120 and doesn't heal you, despite its name. It makes you take 30 less damage next turn. Okay, I suppose. It's average damage. With a choice band, I guess it KOs all of the water weak stuff, so there is that. But, I don't know. Barnacles GX is the same attack as Golisopod had. 2 water and a colorless, 150, switch it to the bench. Sure, I suppose. It's fine, it does see play, but I'm not really too big a fan of it personally. Larvitar is a very weird one to note in the meta stuff, but again, it's for its typing and the amount of damage that it can do. For 2 colorless energy, Second Strike does 10 plus 70 if the opponent already has 3 or more damage counters on them. This effectively makes it another sort of anti-Pikarom thing. This time mostly for Malamar, I believe, because Malamar lets you, with Giratina that we'll talk about in a minute, you can spread damage and stuff around onto the bench, and then Larvitar can eventually get KOs and stuff there. Lugia is mostly a Pokemon that is up to no good, but if you can use it for its second attack, it's still kind of neat as well. 190 HP basic GX. Its first attack, its attacks are expensive, but for triple colorless energy, 30 plus 30 for each energy on the opponent's active. Not really amazing, to be honest. It's gonna like average maybe 90, 120 damage at most. We've got much better without having to be a colorless attacker. Its second attack is kind of neat though, 4 colorless energy, 170 damage, can't use that attack next turn. You can still use the other ones though. 170 for 4 does KO Lele, so you can use this in Accelerant decks to like Guzma and stuff. Again, Nightquag could use this. And Lost Purge is what it tends to get used for because this is the control element to it. For triple colorless energy, it puts the opponent's active and all cards attached to it into the Lost Zone. Yikes. Yeah, double colorless energy is typically what we would see for this because double colorless plus counter gain is where you want to be. And yeah, it's kind of gross. Sceptile is one that gets a GX in here. It has the Ultra Beast damage null one from the previous set, the non-GX, which is pretty good. And Grovyle has Sunshine Grace. So once during the turn before you attack, search your deck for a grass Pokemon, put it into hand. This plays very similar to Garchomp before, and it has the Lurantis counterpart as well. So this very much is like Gen 7 Fluffy Chomp here, because this lets you get all the grass Pokemon out, and your Sceptile is effectively Garchomp. So 230 HP, only 1 retreat too, which is really nice. Most of the line is quite mobile. Grovyle's a bit slow, but most of the line is pretty mobile. And yeah, 1 grass energy, 60, discard a special energy from the opponent's active. That's Garchomp's attack. And then 2 grass energy, 130, move a grass energy from this to one of your bench Pokemon. So it's kind of like Yveltal EX that way actually. Preserve your stuff around, but you've got plenty of grass energy you could use, so that is fine. And then for 1 grass energy, Jungle Heal heals all damage from all of your Pokemon with grass energy attached. Sort of like what Mega Sceptile did, so that's kind of cool too. Yeah, it's a decent tank deck. It does have the capability of being immune to damage from Ultra Beast, so it can actually deal with Blacephalon, which is what you would expect its worst matchup to be, and it's just kind of neat. Gardevoir, I don't know if this one actually saw play. It certainly wasn't in the list that I initially saw for this, but I think it's kind of insane actually. It's a replacement for Gallade in its own right, because it's got the same sort of sensitive attack that Gallade did. If you play a supporter this turn, it does 160 this time, but it does take a Fairy and double colorless. That's not really a problem in Gardevoir though, because you've got the what was it? Shining Arcana? No, that's the new one. God, I forget. Secret Spring, right, to accelerate the Fairy energy, and you play double colors anyway, so that's all good. If you evolve into this one early though, it can do the Sylveon stuff as well. Search your deck for up to 3 cards, put them into the hand. We don't have as much disruption in this format, so there's only like Marshadow and the occasional Judge. So yeah, Brilliant Search is also really strong. So yeah, good card. Shedinja is mostly a control tool, unfortunately, but I have seen this in other stuff as well. It's kind of funky. Effectively, if you discard this Pokemon from play, you can attach it as a tool card, and when the Pokemon that it's attached to gets KO'd, your opponent takes 1 fewer prize cards. So if you can loop this on a single prizer, the opponent can never win the game. That's pretty much it, but it's tough to do, so whatever. Altaria, I'm noting for later because it's not really that good at the moment, but Bright Tone technically can irritate some decks, and that's why I would have it see play later. During your opponent's next turn, prevent all attacks done to, or all damage done to this by attacks from GX and EX Pokemon. Cool. So you can copy this with Mewtwo and Mew later on. There's the build that I have for it, where it's just like you get to know their stuff. And Sonic Edge is effectively a shred style attack, so you can use that to get through Safeguard, which is pretty good too. Euphoria GX is another one of these healing attacks. For a Fairy and a Colorless, you put your opponent to sleep and then auto heal all of your, like full heal all of your Pokemon. That's kind of cool, I suppose. It's like the sleep is the addition to it compared to the earlier versions of this. It's mostly for the other attacks though, and again, it's not amazing by itself because these energy costs are kind of hard to pay, but oh well. Dialga I'm kind of wanted to put down below, but I'm noting it here because there was like a Solgaleo Ninetales deck that played this. 130 HP single prizer. Power Blast is nothing too special, like 2 metal and 2 colorless. 130, discard 1 energy from this Pokemon. Sure, KO's 1 prizes, I guess. Turn back time is the interesting bit here. For a metal and double colorless, if the opponent's an evolution Pokemon, you devolve it. And it also does 60 damage, so it will usually end up KOing via the devolution effect on the opponent's stuff. So that's pretty neat. Giratina is gross, and it's crazy that we are so far into this and we're only just getting to this card. I have a rather large dislike of this card because it basically pushes out every other single prize thing by the time we get to the end of this format. Distortion Door, if it's in the discard pile, it just goes straight back onto the bench, and it puts a damage counter on 2 of the opponent's bench Pokemon when it does so, which is just, what the heck? Why are you allowed to do so much? But it's not just that, because if it was just that, it probably wouldn't be good enough. 130 HP is nice, but like, sure, whatever. For 2 Psychic and a Colorless, it does 130 damage on a basic single prizer, and then it puts 4 damage counters on 1 of your Pokemon. Oh well, right, if you put it on the Giratina and it gets KO'd, well, you just bring it right back. And it's in Psychic, so Malamar gets to accelerate to it as well. I don't understand what they were thinking with this. It's just really rude, to be honest. Victini probably could have been down the bottom, but it's a counter energy thing. I think Passimian decks could play this to get around metal stuff here. For a Fire and a Colorless, it does 20 for each of your basic Pokemon in play. Passimian is an all basic deck, so counter energy this, it does 100, 120 potentially. Fire energy stuff, you know, it's fire weakness, it can hit the metal stuff, it's really good. The Victini Prism is the one that sees a lot more play here. Only 90 HP for Prism Star Attacker seems kind of bad, but that's actually fairly standard moving forward. For 2 Fire Energy, this does 20 for each basic energy in your discard pile. Then you shuffle them all back into the deck. Kind of the crazy thing about this is that it doesn't have to be just Fire Energy, but it is usually just used in the Fire decks. There are Fire Energy decks that play like 18 Fire Energy later on, and this lets you just do ridiculous amounts of damage. It's effectively another GX attack, right? But we could use this at the moment with Flareon, do the Power Burner GX attack for like over 200, get a KO with that, and then Infinity with the Victini, shuffle all the Fire Energy back into the deck as well, get another humongous hit. Very, very fun. Seb Striker sees quite a lot of the play. This is the replacement sort of thing for Artillery, except you have to discard your hand this time. Once during your turn before you attack, discard your hand and draw 4 cards. That's pretty much all it's used for, but it is very powerful draw nonetheless, so we'll note it here. Sigilif, I think, was exactly in Pikaron to counter other Pikaron decks. If the opponent's active GX or EX Pokemon attacks this in the active, then any damage they do also gets put onto them as well. The fact that it's weak to lightning basically meant that it would die to the opponent's Pikarom, but it would also do 300 back to them and one-shot them in return. So it was kind of a deterrent sort of thing there. The rest of it's like not amazing, but if you played the Psychic Energy in it, you could do like 80 damage for free energy, whatever. And Intercept, the GX attack, does 60 for each energy that's on the opponent's active. I mean, it's Psywave sort of thing, I suppose, but whatever, who cares? It's the ability in Pikarom is the main thing. Corvigregus is super weird, but kind of terrifying at the same time. 120 HP is pretty big for this guy too, actually. It's a little bit harder to KO than you'd expect. Spirit Juggling for 1 Psychic and Colorless does only 10, but for each bit of your bench Pokemon that you discard, it does 30 more. So you discard all those Giratina, next turn they can all come back and spread some more damage, and you just keep doing that. It's gross. You know, also discard other stuff that comes into play, stuff like Marshadow or the old Oricorio that can search for energy. It's neat. Fun deck to play by the looks of it. Virizion, I probably shouldn't note this in this bit, but it was used in a meta deck, so sure. Double draw, kind of whatever. We're kind of past that sort of thing now, especially on a 170 HP 2 prize Pokemon. Sensitive Blade is passable though. 2 Grass Energy, if you play the supporter this turn, do 130 damage. Sure. It's mostly for the GX attack though, if you can believe that. For 1 Colorless Energy, put any number of your Pokemon in play and all cards attached to them back into the hand. This is used for an auto win that we will see coming up here. Zekrom GX I think was used in a couple of Pikarom decks specifically because of Bullet Uppercut. The rest of this card is not very good, but if the opponent's active is GX or EX, this does 70 for a single Colorless Energy. It's not affected by weakness though, so you can't KO stuff like Lugia with a Choice Band. That's not how it goes. But that's a lot of damage for a single energy early in the game, so not the worst. White Kyurem is really cool. Notably, its second attack is the main one here, but Field Crush is still neat. If the opponent's got a Stadium in play, double Colorless Energy, 30 damage, discard that Stadium. That's cool. Sometimes that'll get the Prism Star stuff out of the way, which is really solid. Freezing Flames is what we're here for though. 2 Water and a Colorless, 80 damage, plus 80 more if it has a Fire Energy attached to it. So unlike the previous one, which was spread focused, this one is just beat your face in focus, but 160 damage is a lot. Like, I love the Ground Ball, and this does the same thing as the Ground Ball basically. Just takes a lot more effort to keep it going, but we have tools for that, so it's cool. Xerneas Prism, I'm noting because I used it later on as well. I think this does see some play in some Gardevoir Sylveon decks as well. If it moves from the bench to the active, you can shift a bunch of energy to it. 160 HP dude is pretty big for a single Prizer, and it does 160 damage for free Fairy Energy. Can't use that attack next turn though, but that's okay because you just put it to the bench again and you are fine. Trumbeak is the last part of the Lost March deck. This is kind of the Lampent of the deck. If it's in the hand, you can reveal it, look at the top card of the opponent's deck, put this guy into the Lost Zone. If the card you reveal is a supporter card, then you put that into the Lost Zone as well. If they don't have any cards left in the deck, can't use the ability, but you also just win the game, so who really cares? Turtonator sees a lot of play in fire stuff later on when we have all the full support for it. It's free fire energy for its explosive jet. You discard any number of fire from your Pokemon in play and do 50 damage for each one you discarded. The Garnadel works very well with this. It's the best way of saying it. Tapu Bulu is another counter energy type thing. Probably could have put this down the bottom, but it's fine. For a Grass and Colorless, it does 20 for each of the opponent's bench Pokemon. So if the opponent's Grass weak, then you can do quite a bit with this for like 100 damage times 2 basically. Wild Tackle, whatever. I mean, it's if you can pay it, it's fine. Maybe counter gain on this as well. You could get to 240 on Grass weak stuff. It's kind of whatever. And then finally, in the bottom row here, Solgaleo GX is finally out, the promo one here. 250 HP and gives your Pokemon no weakness. Does actually come up sometimes. It's mostly here for Turbo Strike. 120 damage for a double colorless and attach 2 basic energy from your discard to one of your bench. Is basically Mega Manectric at that point. Its GX attack is another full heal one for a double colorless, heals all of your Pokemon. I guess that's kind of cool. We see this a lot in Mewtwo and Mew later on as another discard target, so that you've got a very strong attack to fall back on. But even just now in this evolution style format, we could play it as its own thing. We have the other Solgaleo that does a ton for the deck, so very cool stuff. Nihilego is often used in single prize Malamar decks for Nightcap. If the opponent has exactly 2 prize cards remaining, you just copy any one of their attacks in play. If it's a GX attack, of course, you have to flip your marker, so that's neat. And then also Confuse and Poison, I guess, is kind of cool in the early game as well, but it's mostly for Nightcap here. Then we have Garnadel we've spoken about, but the attack is actually kind of worth noting too. For triple colorless energy, if you have exactly 3 prize cards remaining, this does 160 damage, so that one specific turn is going to do an absolute boatload of damage to go through. It's kind of neat. And then Blacephalon GX is its main partner in crime at the moment, unless you're playing Quagsire, of course. 180 HP GX, a little bit on the frail side for a 2-prizer, but that's okay. Its Bursting Burn attack can leave the opponent burned and confused, which is sometimes necessary for stalling. Confusion is very annoying after all. And Mind Blown is the main attack here. 50 damage times the number of energy that you lost zone from your field for 2 fire as a base cost. Yeah, that is a one-shot on anything that you want, basically. And if you accelerate enough energy within the Garnadel back to itself, and then Lost Zone all of those, you can just do one-shot numbers every turn. Burst GX is worth noting, and something Sai did forget about in our game. For 1 fire energy, discard one of your prize cards. If it is an energy of any type, you can accelerate it to one of your Pokemon. But it effectively, like, soft takes a prize card. It's very much like Kartana that way. But if it happens to be an energy, well, it just goes to your bench, which is really good. And finally, for the meta-based stuff, we've got Zeraora GX. Its Thunderclap Zone is effectively a Manaphy replacement. It lets your lightning energy-laden Pokemon retreat for free, which is obviously very strong. Plasma Fist is solid later on as well, 160 damage for 2 lightning and colorless. Can't attack next turn, but you can retreat out, so that's fine. And Full Voltage is actually really good too. It's basically Nitro Tank with upsides. For 1 lightning energy, attach 5 basic energy from your discard pile to your Pokemon in any way that you like. So currently the deck that would use this is Rayquaza, but it's obviously a fantastic Pikarom mobility tool later as well. Super good card. We have a lot of non-meta Pokemon to speak on here as well. I realize this is going super long, but there's just so much to talk about here. And some of these may come up in the future as well, so we'll just briefly go over stuff here. Charizard is cute, but doesn't really have enough support at the moment. Does more damage for the GX and EX Pokemon that your opponent has in play, but it's just a bit hard to charge up right now. Does a decent base damage though, so even if they're not a GX deck, if you can get Fiery Blast to work, it's going to do a lot. Alolan Vulpix is noteworthy here, apart from because the meme artwork is great, but also because when the other Vulpix rotates, this is the best one we could play. If you have a Fairy Pokemon in play, it doesn't have a retreat cost, kind of cute. Alolan Persian sees play with, I think it was Zoroark later on actually. It doesn't cost any energy, and it does 30 less for each energy that's on the opponent's active. Starts at 90 though, so that's kind of neat. The Meowth that it evolves from does 70 for no energy on your first turn going second, so also kind of cool. Blissey has its own deck later with triple acceleration energy and some other stuff. 160 HP, powerful slap is the main bit here, believe it or not. You flip a coin for each energy that's on this Pokemon and do 80 damage per heads. Victini can reflip in this format, so there's a way of like giving yourself another chance, we'll say. If you get like 6-7 energy on this thing, which is not impossible with triple acceleration, you're going to do quite a lot here. Kingdra's sort of neat. A couple of Meganium decks that play this. 230 HPs on the frail side for stage 2s, but whatever. Reverse Thrust for 30 switches to the bench, that's kind of cute. Not the greatest on the stage 2, but still. Its main attacks, Maelstrom I think is the main attack you would use here actually. 40 to each of the opponent's Pokemon as your GX attack for a single energy. 40's not a ton, but it does do a decent amount of setup, which is good. And if you get Super Boost on this thing, Hydro Pump becomes quite strong. 10 for one colorless, but it does 50 more for each water energy that's on this thing. If you could somehow fit a stage 2 thing in Quagnag, this would be great, but you can't, so oh well. I like it though. It's probably the last like good Kingdra, but I still kind of like it. Scizor takes less damage and does 130 for 2 energy if the opponent's got a special energy on them. Problem is, if they don't have a special energy, it does like 60, which is miserable, so not that great. Vaporeon, the worst of the evolutions for sure. If you have an active water Pokemon, this can heal 30 damage from it once per turn. Okay, I suppose. 40 plus 30 for each water energy that's on it. Base cost of triple colorless. You can't use this. You can't use this or Glaceon actually out of the gate with Energy Evolution for attacking, so that's kind of lame. But yeah, it just doesn't do much. Cure Shower is another heal all thing, but this time it's only from water Pokemon, so it's pretty bad. Espeon I wanted to put at the top, but I don't remember if this sees any play or not because it's a bit situational, to be honest. Draw Free, I guess, is kind of cute on the Energy Evolution stuff. It is a single prizer after all, unlike the Sylveon. But Energy Crush is what we're here for. 1 Psychic, 20 plus 20 for each energy that's on all of the opponent's Pokemon. This used to cost triple colorless back in Gen 3, by the way. Same attack. Kind of crazy. It's on an Espeon too, so there you go. But it's an Energy Evolution target. Could be decent if you're playing Espeon GX, I suppose. Moltres, and it's fine. It's just a bit unnecessary if I remember rightly. Assisting Heater is another one of these Oblivion Wing style attacks. 30 for 1 fire, attach a fire from your hand this time to one of your bench. It's not a discard thing, so that might end up making it worse as well. Its main attack only does 90, so it's just not that impressive in the end, I don't think. Dragonite GX is the main thing that you would play with Lance because of Dragon Porter. Lets you put 3 Dragon Pokemon from the discard pile onto the bench. Doesn't have to be basics, so you can get all the stuff with that. The problem is it's a GX attack that takes a ton of energy as well, so not amazing. And its other attacks are just not very good, really. 1 Lightning for 70 is actually probably the attack you're going to use most often. Like, you could make a tank deck with this, but I just don't really see it. Giga Impact is far too expensive for what it does. The combo that you're supposed to use this with is Altaria, because we have Fight Song Altaria back, so if you get 3 or hopefully 4, but if you get 3 of these in play, then your Dragon Claw can do like 130 or something, and you just like max potion over and over. I don't think that's worth it though. Typhlosion, unfortunately, is too expensive in attacking for a stage 2. It can convert all of its energy to fire, so that's kind of neat, because triple acceleration energy could work later on. And Lost Flame only does 120 for 4, but it puts 2 energy from the opponent's active to the Lost Zone, which is incredibly disruptive. But it's on the stage 2 for 4 energy, with no acceleration going for it, just not good enough. For Alligators, a reprint of the original OP for Alligator from Generation 2. It lets you discard water from your hand as often as you like during a turn, and for only 2 energy this time, 10 plus 20 for each water in your discard pile, and you do have to shuffle those back into the deck. If we still had Professor's Letter, I would possibly consider this like just about playable, but we don't, so it's not really worth it. Lantern is like not a good control tool card because we just have Oranguru that does the stuff here, but in a different format this would be insane. 1 energy, shuffle 4 items and you discard pile into the deck is really strong. Ampharos is just a little bit too hungry without a decent way of searching the energy. If you lost zone to lightning energy from the hand, you can also paralyze the opponent. Pretty cool, but the Ampharos itself doesn't do any real damage, so too expensive as stage 2. It pairs with the Raikou down here, which for lightning and colorless does 120 if you've got the lightning energy in the lost zone. This was really good in the theme deck wars, actually. This was one of the better theme decks in the format back in PTCGO, because this was just difficult to beat, right? 120 damage on a basic Pokemon. I think you had 2 of in the deck as well. So, strong card in that format. That's about it. There are 3 different Unknown in here, 2 of which are banned from Expanded, by the way, that all of them have an auto win condition if they are active. They are kind of ridiculous auto win conditions, but they are mostly manageable. Damage here, if you have 66 or more damage counters on your bench Pokemon, you can just win the game. This got broken in Expanded with Blastoise and Frozen City. The energy reset card that I mentioned in the rotation video actually lets you pull up all of your energy that you've accelerated with Blastoise, and Frozen City, for each non-plasma Pokemon that you put energy on, you just put like 2 damage counters on them every time. So you rack up all the damage on the Magikarp and Wailord that's got so much HP, and then pick this up, pick all the energy up even from the stuff, put them all down again to get all the damage you need, get this in the active, win the game on turn 1. It's very stupid. The other one that actually does have a meme deck in Standard eventually is the hand one. This is where Whitney comes in. If you have 35 or more cards in your hand, you can also win with this in the active spot. So the idea is later on there is a Salazzle that does Roast Reveal to draw cards, the same as what Ninetales used to do. And you use that alongside Recovery for those fire energy. And eventually you use the Virizion to pick up all of your Salazzle back to the hand, gets you to 35 cards, and then this can win you the game. That's the goal. The last one makes the condition like unattainable, really, because not every deck even plays enough cards for this to work. If the opponent has exactly 12 or more supporter cards in their lost zone, you win the game. How are we getting there? Like, Trumbeat can get some of them, potentially, but not every deck even plays 12 supporters. I think we do at the moment because we've got Guzma, but even then, I have decks that play like 11 as the most, right? 8 Dross and 3 Lily. So not every deck will even have that, and you have to get every single one of their supporters in the lost zone at that point. Like Girafarig, I suppose? Just, nah. Not every deck can even fulfill this condition. Delibird I think is cool. I don't think it's good, but for 1 colorless energy, you basically get to attach tools from your deck to each of your bench Pokemon that don't have tools on them. So that's neat. There's a tool drop deck later on, so I guess you could potentially use it for that. I don't know. Donphan is a very dumb thing with the Florges and Last Chance Potion that we have at the moment. If it's at full HP and would be KO'd, it isn't KO'd, it survives on 10. And the Florges lets you flip to put an item card from your discard pile back into the top of the deck, so you just draw it next turn. The item card in question lets you heal 120 damage if you are at 30 HP or less remaining. So yeah, you just kind of keep looping this thing and it's really annoying. That's pretty much it. Miltank has the Milk Cannon attack for triple colorless. It lets you reveal any number of Moo Milks in your hand, do 60 for each one revealed this way. Andrew Mahone had a meme video on this one. The Moo Milk does heal 30 per coin flip success this time around, but it's still really bad. So you basically just use it for this. It's a very funny deck, especially when there's not as much disruption going around, but it's not remotely good, so that's why I didn't bother mentioning it. Entei is another one that was really good in the theme deck format. Eruption with Macago was actually pretty solid. You do 80 damage for 2 fire and a colorless, but you reveal, discard even, the top card of both players' decks, and for every energy that was discarded that way, 60 more damage. So 140 in theme deck format was actually really good. Sometimes you'd spike it at 200 in KO stage 2s as well. One of the best theme decks in that format, so I liked it. The Suicune is probably okay in Quagnag. If it's active, you can force the opponent to switch. It's like Repel. It doesn't do any real damage per se, but it only has a 1 retreat, so if the opponent's got like a super annoying wall in the active or something, you could probably force them out, which is kind of neat. Hello, the return of my beloved. There's actually a Primarina in here, which makes one of my favorite decks from the early times happen as well. Ho-Oh this time round is 30 plus 30 for each different type of basic energy on it for 3 colorless energy. So like 120 damage in ideal situations, plus more if you add more. The deck in question, I played with Venusaur from Expedition to let you double attach when you attached from hand for the turn, and this Primarina does exactly the same thing. If you have an energy attached for turn, you can attach 2 energy instead. It's not good enough, mind you, because this damage is still very low even if you get that going, but the idea is really cute, and I do like the card just because of that. Celebi Prism is a self-devolver, which is not really something we ever see, but very, very limited use. And the fact if you only get like 1 go at this as well, not really sure if it's worth it. Blaziken is another return to Generation 3. Firestarter is the same ability that we had before. Accelerate a fire energy from your discard to one of your bench. Problem really now is that we have Malamar doing this for Psychic, so it feels bad having this on the stage 2. Firestream is at least a bit better than it used to be. Fire double colors to do 90, discard a fire, and do 20 spread. That's solid. Like, it's not a terrible card. And we have the Blaziken GX from the previous set, which is pretty strong. Does like 210 for free, discard 2, so like, there's synergy. It's just a bit heavy to set up, I think. I don't know. I mean, I might be interested in trying it, but I don't think it's that good. Silcoon and Cascoon are both in here because they have an absolutely busted version of Water Duplicates. For 1 colorless energy, search your deck for 4 in combination of Silcoon and Cascoon, no matter which one of these you put down. That's ridiculous, but they have nothing good to evolve into. The best evolution for them is Dustox that lets you auto poison and paralyze the opponent. It's a triple poison, but like, that's still not good enough really. It takes so long to set up too. There's a Ninjask to go along with the Shedinja. If there's a Shedinja in your discard and you evolve into the Ninjask, you just automatically put Shedinja into play, which is cute, but just rescue Stretcher the Shedinja and put that into play, because this guy doesn't do anything, so there's not really a reason to play it, you know? Sableye, I think, is actually kind of decent until next set when Jirachi overtakes it. If you go first, Quick Hunt lets you, for any energy, put 1 card from your your deck into the hand, like it's a computer search, right? And one of the things Malamar can have some issues with is consistency. I like this guy. I don't remember if he sees play, I'll have to look it up, but I think it's off meta is a good thing for it. Curse Drop is also pretty good though. 3 damage counters on the opponent's Pokemon in any way that you like. Doesn't sound like a lot, but this guy's also Psychic type, so you could spell tag it. And yeah, there's some potential there. So I'm probably going to mess around with this in Tina tags. Altaria we've mentioned, there's nothing else really to it. At least you could attack for DCE this time, but like it just does no damage, so whatever. The 2 other Kecleon here, the unit colors, because we for some reason got unit color 2 first. These ones work with the other blend energies, become the respective types. Tongue Smack, unfortunately, is not great, so Grass, Water, Fire, although it's probably the most used one, isn't really that amazing, because the opponent has to be an evolution for it to work, so that's a shame. And then this one would be great, because Double Colorless Energy would be good for it, but you can't Double Colorless it, since it has, you know, like, it has to have the unit energy on it. So that feels kind of bad too. So, yeah, not super good. There's a Salamence archetype in here that maybe you could try and do land stuff with. The non-GX one, if it's active, you can gust the opponent, which is pretty good, but its attack is absolutely awful, so you can never use it for attacking. That's okay though, because the GX lets it retreat for free. It any of your Pokemon in play that are not GX and EX can retreat for free. Which is super weird why you would do it that way, but, you know, Solgaleo let you automatically just switch, which is way better than this. I don't know why the Dragon had to get nerfed like that. Bright Flame for Water, Fire, double colorless does 200 and discards 2 energy. Nah. You know, it's not that much damage. I mean, I guess you could buff it with Altarias, but like, look how much we're trying to force this here, right? And it's got no acceleration at that point. Flame Jet as the GX attack lets it snipe 120 to one of the opponent's Pokemon. I think this is also a Gen 3 reference to Salaman's EX actually, but I'd have to look it up because I don't actually remember here. There's a Vespiquen that does 120 damage for 1 grass energy, which is pretty good, but if you don't have all grass Pokemon on the bench and fill your bench as well, if you have 4 or fewer grass Pokemon on your bench, this does nothing. So, fun meme deck. There's no draw power in grass though, so Vespiquen Sceptile is about the best that you're gonna get, and that's not very strong to be honest. There's a Pachirisu that I don't remember if it sees play or not, but it reads like it should. Before doing damage, this 1 lightning 20 damage attack can discard all tools on the opponent's active Pokemon. If you discard a tool that way, it's 60 and auto paralysis. I don't remember if there's anything weak enough to lightning that makes this work in this format, but 60 paralysis is actually really good, so I feel like this could have seen play. I'll have to look it up. Shaman sees play in Salasaur and like nothing else. Once during your turn, heal 20 for new active grass Pokemon, so you play 4 Salasaur and 3 of this, and this is very respectable healing for the stuff. Add this to Life Forest and you're suddenly healing 120 every time, it's like really strong. Durant was a bit of a win condition for a couple of the control decks in this format, or the stall decks in this one. DC, discard the top 2 cards of the opponent's deck. Not as strong as it was in the past, but that's for the best to be honest with you. Reshiram GX saw play and I don't understand why, because it's just really bad. Vermilion GX is like okay, I suppose, if you have energy in hand, but it takes a ridiculous free fire and a colorless to do. So like turn 1 you've got a Kiawe in order to get this going, and then turn 2, what are we doing, right? 110 auto burn for its regular attack is just not good enough. Flame Charge is like passable, but it accelerates to itself, which then puts it in range of dying the next turn, so I hate it. I don't know why it saw any play. Kieran only takes water energy, so that's pretty good for a dragon type, but its attacks are just like sort of passable and nothing else. Outrage is like fine, but we're sort of past that point now without having weakness on it. We already have Reshiram and Zekrom that can do that anyway. And Frost Spear, 100 Snipe 20, this was good with Genesect in Gen 5. Not amazing here, to be honest. You could probably make something out of this in Altaria, but it's just like, why? You know, doesn't really seem that good. White Kyurem, also not too impressive, but at least it can do a decent amount of damage. Roll Water, Fire, and a Colorless, you do 160 if you have a damage counter on you, so if you're playing Rainbow Energy, that can be quite good. Otherwise, not amazing, to be honest with you. Dragon Nova focuses on fire energy, so you can't even play this in Quagnag, and Shred is also fire, so it's not that amazing. Genesect sees play with Tool Drop later on, attach 2 tools to it. That's about it. None of its other stuff is really that noteworthy, so yeah, just have an extra tool in play. Dedenne, I'm noting because of the Nuzzle deck, which is slowly building up here, that culminates in the Cosmic Eclipse Raichu right at the start of next format, basically. Nuzzle Shot snipes 10 for each Pokemon that you have Nuzzle on in play, so you can snipe 60 for 1 energy. Pretty solid. It gives the deck a little bit more versatility than just being a straight like damage the active type thing. I mentioned it pre-Marina, the Mimikyu is the next thing here. This is sort of like Alakazam, the Mega that we had before. Its first attack is Auto Confuse, that can sometimes come up I suppose. Snuggle and Fall lets you do 10 plus 30 for each damage counter that's already on the opponent's active, so the same scaling that Alakazam had. We have more HP in general now though, so the numbers have to be a little bit higher up for it, probably a little bit too hard to do. Dream Fear is really, really painful though, and the one reason you might see this actually come up. For 1 Fairy Energy, choose one of the opponent's bench and shuffle it into the deck. It's kinda neat. 170 HP, no weakness Pokemon as well is also pretty solid. So I remember this comes up, but it's not like too crazy by itself. Drampa lets you attach basic energy from your discard to one of your dragon Pokemon. That's pretty solid, 20 damage for one colorless, so it can be used anywhere basically. But that requires good dragon Pokemon, and I just don't think we have that at the moment. The only one really is Ray, and Rayquaza doesn't really do much, so I'm not super keen on that. Tapu Koko, I don't remember if this sees play, but it's got a hit and run attack, so we'll note it anyway. DCE for 30, you can switch it to the bench. That sometimes comes up in like wall stall sort of decks, so yeah. Tapu Lele is an interesting one for fairy decks. If you put a fairy charm tool on this thing, then you get to automatically confuse the opponent. It doesn't do anything else noteworthy, but that can sometimes be decent if you have enough stuff that way. I think the problem is then how, like, you have to play Magearna as well to get the tool off it again, so that you can reuse it, and that's just a little bit too much bench space for my liking. Tapu Fini, if you're playing Victini and counter energy for some reason, I guess you could use this. If you flip heads, it shuffles the opponent's active into the deck, but for 2 energy. That's about all it does that's noteworthy, but I guess that's kind of cute. And then finally, from the promo section, we have Lunala GX, which is actually good, it's just very ill-suited to this format. It's a bit frail at 230 HP, doesn't have a retreat cost this time, which is nice. DC for 50, nothing too special. Lunar Javelin would be really good for Malamar decks if this wasn't a stage 2. 2 Psychic and 2 Colors to do 200. You have to specifically discard the Psychic, but you also have no retreat, so you can just get to the bench again, which is good. And Requiem GX, I think, is the highest damage GX attack we've seen so far. 3 Psychic and 1 Colors to do 250 flat. That's it, that's all it does. But to be honest, that's pretty much as good as what the previous Lunala's GX attack was anyway, so yeah, it KOs just about everything. Until tag teams come out, and then it doesn't, so it's not good then. And that's finally it. Yeah, I know, it's a really long thing for this. If you've managed to somehow get through all of this, thank you very much. It's appreciated. I guess you could let me know if you did, because that'd be fun, but yeah, I don't know. This set is, these sets, I should say, mostly Lost Thunder, but there are a couple of things in Dragon Majesty that are decent. There are decks that we could build here, it's just, are they actually good enough sort of thing, you know? Like, maybe Dragonite could get played, who knows? But there's so much stuff in here. We did, I think, like 10 or 11 decks yesterday in our, as at the time of recording, in our initial testing thing for it, and that's just kind of unheard of. I don't think, and we haven't even scratched the surface of this yet. There's still at least another dozen that we have been wanting to play, so tons and tons of really cool stuff in here. If I missed any cards that you actually really like out of this set, do let me know, because there's surely something that's that could have been spoken about, but again, just see how many cards are in here. It's kind of ridiculous. Until next time though, thank you very much for listening in, and we'll see you then.